Can we zoom? Yeah, there we go. That's good. All right. Hopefully everyone's forgiving. It's my first time. Welcome to the first ever edition of Unfit to Print News Roundup. This is a weekly U.S. news roundup working to cut through the billionaire-owned media's BS and keep you caught up with what you need to know. For those of you watching for a history class in the far future, this will be October 28th, 2025 through November 4th, 2025. And I do hope for both our sakes that the normal people of the world got together and made things better than they are right now. We've got a lot to cover today. The government shutdown, a declining economy, ICE raids, looming war with Venezuela and Colombia, the ongoing massacres in Gaza and Sudan, and the increasing inaccessibility of healthcare. So let's start with everybody's wallet. I'm not going to lie, recession seems just about guaranteed. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent admitted that parts of the economy are already in recession. Amazon just announced 30,000 layoffs. Other big companies are following suit. Basic indicators like car loan delinquency are way up, and there are whole regions of the United States in full recession mode. The government shutdown isn't the only problem, but it's not helping things. According to Congress, we've lost at least $7 billion already from the economy. Just poof, gone. We're talking about people's paychecks, basic services here. The longer this goes on, the deeper a hole the economy goes down. The Trump admin is bizarrely claiming the shutdown has something to do with the radical left, quote unquote, trying to give health care to undocumented immigrants and trans people. And there's just zero validity to those claims. But there is nothing like hatred to fire up the base, right? So now they're coming after SNAP benefits, federal food assistance. Now, due to a last-second intervention from federal judges, it looks like SNAP benefits haven't been entirely halted, but the Trump White House is only agreeing to pay about half of what the people of this country expect, and also with significant delays. And let's be real, that's already too little. We're talking about 42 million people on SNAP benefits, and unlike what rich politicians say, these aren't just a bunch of freeloaders. I mean, we're talking about hardworking people, not to mention over 16 million children. The people who receive SNAP benefits often prop up the economy with their sweat, with their aching backs for far too little pay. This country just doesn't run without them. We're talking about the richest country in history, and you're saying we can't afford to feed everyone? Yeah, cut the crap. But the shutdown isn't the only source of pain because Trump's trade wars are doing real damage. It's still just getting worse, honestly. He's unilaterally and illegally been declaring new taxes left and right. He even jacked up the cost of doing business with Canada by 10% because he's mad at commercial playing in Ontario. And while Americans are suffering, what does Washington decide to do? Well, they just sent $40 billion to the man-child president of Argentina, Javier Milei, all because his own far-right agenda didn't work out. But our taxes aren't just being given to fund yet another failed libertarian project. They're getting funneled into war and violence all around the world right now. It's looking increasingly likely that a new war is about to be launched against the 34 million people living in Venezuela and maybe even also against 53 million people in Colombia too. Why? Is it because they pose an active threat to our peace and security, or because they're interested in screwing over average Americans for profits? No. If that were the case, we would bomb Silicon Valley. But nope, we are looking to bomb Venezuela. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is really drooling for war in Latin America. And let's not forget, this is the guy that not a single member of the Senate, Democrat or Republican, voted against being confirmed. Rubio, like the rest of our government, doesn't like it that there are Latin American countries that don't bow down to every last command of the United States. Plus, these countries have a whole lot of oil and other resources that the mega rich in the US think they have a right to own. So on unverified claims about drug smuggling, the US has conducted at least 14 airstrikes in the Caribbean and killed over 60 people. Were these people really drug smugglers? Were they even headed for the United States? Probably not. Actually, according to independent investigation, as well as the claim of multiple Latin American governments, that's just not true. And Trump and Vance have both independently joked now that the residents of these nations shouldn't go fishing for risk of getting blown up, which shows they don't actually care who they kill. Trump has publicly now stated that the CIA has begun operations to overthrow Venezuela's president, Nicolas Maduro, and Colombia's own president, Gustavo Petro, claims his intelligence services have found similar clandestine operations underway to unseat him. And that's not an idle threat. The U.S. has done this a lot of times to real serious damage in Latin America over the decades. Meanwhile, a massive fleet has gathered in the Caribbean, headed by the USS Gerald R. Ford, which is the lead aircraft carrier of the US Navy. It's scary stuff. What happens next? It's honestly unclear, but if you think a brutal war will lead to less migration or less violence against Americans or in any way suppress the drug trade, then you just don't know much about war. Go read about Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, Libya, and see just how much stability those governments collapsing led to the region. So, for the sake of everyone, but especially the people living in these countries, we have a moral duty to say no to this ridiculous war. I wish I could say foreign policy chills out with the rest of the world, but that is not the case. Our allies, who we give billions in weapons to every year in the United Arab Emirates, have been busy supporting mass murder in Sudan, where their proxies in the Rapid Support Forces, the RSF, which is an Arab nationalist rebel group, have been carrying out massacres at such a scale you can see the bloodstains from the sky. The city of El Fasher fell last week after a brutal siege, and the world watched in horror as the RSF brutally killed thousands, including figures such as Sahim Hassan, a humanitarian and former member of Sudan's National Assembly. The RSF's fighters were found armed not just with weapons from the UAE, but from the United Kingdom and the United States as well. Maybe writing a blank check to repressive regimes all around the world isn't worth the investment, no matter how much oil it secures. Just a thought. And then there's the 51st state itself, the US's biggest aircraft carrier, to hear the US State Department tell it, Israel, who, despite the supposed ceasefire, has killed at least 240 Palestinians in Gaza since the ceasefire began and wounded 600 more through dozens of highly illegal airstrikes. Just as with massacres over the past 2 years, it's really not possible to know the full death toll until a large-scale international investigation can take place. Something that the United States and Israel just refuses to let happen. Hell, even basic journalism can get you killed. At the time of recording, 256 journalists have now been murdered by Israel and Gaza over the last 2 years, including writer Mohammed al-Manurawi and his wife while they slept in their tent on the night of October 28th. As for the Western press, it's not interested in calling out the crimes of Israel or any American proxy. After over 100 Palestinians were butchered in a single night last week, outlets like BBC, CBS, NBC, and NPR ran headlines like, "Israel says the ceasefire deal is back on," uncritically reporting the Israeli and US narrative. Can you imagine what the headlines would be if over 100 Israelis or Americans were slain in a single night? This is racism, folks. It's pure and simple, and it's why we need to be careful listening to what the billionaire-owned media has to say. And I'd honestly be remiss not to mention the state of the many thousands of Palestinian prisoners still being illegally held by Israel, many of them without even a formal charge. The bodies of dead prisoners returned to Gaza have shown severe signs of torment and abuse, as well as having entire organs missing, which would track with the claims of Israeli pathologists of illegal organ harvesting going back as far as the 90s. This all comes alongside leaks of videos from Israeli detention centers by military advocate general Yafat Tomer Yerushalmi, which depicts the brutalization of Palestinian prisoners, including a man being sodomized by a group of guards with a metal pipe. Of course, the Israeli military moved quickly to arrest Yafat herself for exposing these crimes. Interesting. I could go on at length, but honestly, we'd be here all day. But war is bad, folks. Militarism only serves the mega rich, and the only battles we should be engaged in are against our own ruling class. Don't let anyone fool you either with conspiracy theories. Neither Israel, nor the United Arab Emirates, nor any other U.S. proxy are manipulating the United States or controlling them, certainly. Their every action serves the interest of our billionaire ruling class. The tail does not wag the dog. The blood is on our country's hands, and it is on us to put a stop to it. How about in our country itself? Unfortunately, there's plenty of militarism going on here with Trump's private army, also known as ICE, which has had its budget tripled and is marching through the streets with masks, no badges, and weapons of war. From Black Hawk helicopter raids to growing surveillance to tear gassing a Halloween parade in Chicago full of children, this state sanctioned fascist militia has had a hell of a month. Still, it isn't enough for the far right, who are in the process of firing the heads of ICE offices all around the country and replacing them with Trump loyalists. This process is being overseen by a guy named Greg Bavino, who looks like an SS officer who forgot to hire a tailor. Let's be very clear. ICE is currently being shaped into an apparatus meant to control and police us all. Networks are being built for rapid deportation and or incarceration across the country, with Texas taking the lead with their newly dubbed Shadow Network. Doesn't sound cool to me. Orders have been found to arm ICE offices with weaponry such as rocket launchers, and dog whistle filled recruitment ads are running on all the big networks. You can just watch college football and see it. This is happening as Trump begins to weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies and issues orders dubbing Antifa, a group that doesn't formally exist, according to the FBI, by the way, a terrorist organization. Have you read about the Red Scare of the 1950s? If not, maybe you should. It's coming back in a big way, but this time the government can look through your phone camera while they do it. It's scary stuff. I wish I could say the Democratic Party was mounting an effective resistance, but unfortunately, a lot of this was straight up in their border security bill introduced in 2024 under Joe Biden, a bill that only failed to pass because the Republicans wanted to be the ones to carry it out. This is how things get worse. We have a rabidly racist right wing obsessed with obliterating their enemies and a weak excuse for an opposition party that capitulates to the conservative narrative at the drop of a hat. But not everyone is capitulating. We've got Zoran Mamdani. He's a professed democratic socialist, immigrant, and possibly the most patient man alive when it comes to mispronunciation of his name. He is poised to win the mayor's seat in New York City. This is being recorded the day of Election Day. And despite endless attempts from the Democratic Party establishment and the right wing alike to stop him, the momentum seems to be unstoppable. Party for Socialism Liberation, which is a grassroots left-wing third party, has announced challenges for offices from governor to senator to insurance commissioner in states all around the country. Brave networks of people, too, some longtime members of official organizations and others just coming together with their neighbors in a time of need, have risen up to drive out ICE out of their neighborhoods, out of their streets, out of their cities. They're organizing legal defenses for those wrongfully accused. They're carrying out Know Your Rights campaigns, and they're leading historically large protests to shatter this regime's narrative of invincibility. So carry on with that. Power to normal people taking history in their hands. That's what we're all about. Let's talk about healthcare here as we're getting towards the end. Tax credits for the Affordable Care Act insurance coverage have expired, which will lead to an average 114% increase for the cost of market healthcare. We're talking about 24 million people on these healthcare plans, and that's just the ones who could already afford healthcare. And afford, I'm putting in quotes, right? Because it squeezes all of us. As always, the right wing is, of course, focusing on attacking the healthcare of the most vulnerable populations, especially trans healthcare. New penalties for nonprofits that assist trans people have been introduced, and it's believed that soon Medicaid benefits will be denied to hospitals that treat trans youth. Meanwhile, liberal institutions are unfortunately caving, with many healthcare centers complying in advance, and even colleges like Washington State University introducing curricula from anti-transgender hate groups like SEGM to courses for their doctors. There was a real cost to this in human misery and death. I'd like to share one story in particular, even though it's quite heavy. Last week, we learned that Leah Smith, a 21-year-old student and athlete at Middlebury College, committed suicide after a targeted online harassment campaign by hate sites like He Cheated drove her from her college's swim team. Leah was a beloved member of the Middlebury community, known for making others feel welcome and standing up for those without a voice. Her loss, along with the loss of hundreds of other trans people who die in this country every year, directly or indirectly to hate, can't be calculated or overstated. A story like this makes it all the more heinous that the governor of California and likely Democratic nominee for president in 2028, Gavin Newsom, said just this week that he would ban transgender people from playing sports due to fairness. The political games our ruling class plays may seem petty to guys like Gavin, but its cost in human blood is real. Leah's blood. and people like her all around this country. Leah's family has requested people donate to Middlebury's Prism Center for Queer and Trans Life in her honor. I'll put the link in this episode's description. Please give if you can. Let's finish with some good news because we do need it. Although climate change does remain a massive concern, in fact, the UN General Secretary announced this past week that humanity has officially failed to stop 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming. Researchers with the Arizona Department of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology have found that due to many people working extremely hard to keep species from going extinct, that the rate of extinction has slowed over recent years. In fact, even the sea turtle population, so long at the center of our conservation efforts, has increased by 30% over recent decades. Though the future of so many species, including the turtles, remain at risk, it is important we remember that when we take action, we can lessen, stop, and even reverse so much of the damage our system has caused. That applies to environment, but that applies to politics too. Now, if you want to hear me and my friends who are way smarter than me, Lenore and Jen, talk about some of this stuff at greater length, please check out this week's episode of Unfit to Print, wherever you get your podcasts. And make sure you keep up on your own studies. Don't just take my word for it. Dig deeply, think critically, seek out primary sources, read and read some more. It's only by understanding this messed up world that we can work together to fix it. Until next week, I'm Jay, making like a sea turtle and surviving another day.